Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session. Nobody's interested in Ukraine these days, right? It's a great pleasure to welcome Petro Poroshenko, the former president of Ukraine. And Mr. Poroshenko, I hear that English lessons in Ukraine are now far advanced. I mean, in first graders used to say, "Hello, my name is Volodymyr," and now was there a quid pro quo? They seem to. You used to have to get to university to know phrases like that. We live in the real world, and so we are going to come to a couple of points on the issue that has, I won't use the word, is obsessing, is consuming the United States of America. But underneath that, there are major issues. Let's not forget, you came to power in 2014. That was the year that Russia annexed Crimea and started a war in the east of your country. We're going to go into quite a number of angles on that particular subject. I want to put to you that it is 5 years now. Until and as long as there is a Vladimir Putin or someone like him as president of Russia, you're never getting Crimea back, are you?
My answer would be very short. Definitely yes. The sooner, the earlier, the better. And first of all, Robin, I want to thank you for invitation. I want to thank Peter for invitation. I want to thanks for this lobster. This is quite important, and just for your information, very many people wants to have it. So I want to thank you. Second, I want to thanks for the fantastic hospitality I feel here in Canada, and I feel that from the very first moment of my presidency, because in the year 2014, when Ukraine don't have an army, when it was absolutely shocking fact of the illegal annexation of the Crimea, and you know that annexation started in the 20th of February, and I was in Crimea in Simferopol on the 27th of February as a member of Ukrainian Parliament. Tried to deliver the message that we hate the idea to make a military conflict and to deliver the information to the people of the Crimea that we are very much flexible and do our best to protect country, national sovereignty and territorial integrity against Russian illegal annexation. But it was firm decision of Putin to grab Crimea, and the world do not understand what's going on, because nobody can believe that the whole post-war global security system can be destroyed in one moment by the decision of one person. Because post-war security system was based on the Security Council of the United Nations, and one of the permanent members of the Security Council who has a veto right become an aggressor, nobody can believe it. We don't give them any tiny reason to attack us. And I doubt that everybody understands what's happened and why Putin making a decision to attack us. And even when Putin make an aggression against our country, a little bit later on April and May, year 2014, I have my inauguration on the 7th of June. The world call it conflict on the east of Ukraine, mentioning a kind of civil war. And only when me as a commander-in-chief of Ukrainian army present to the world hundreds of Russian soldiers which were captured on Ukrainian territory, that was a disaster, because Putin gave an explanation, no, we have no Russian soldiers there. Mr. Putin, could you command this person? Yes, this is Russian, but this is not a soldier. This is their tag, this is their documents, that this is the regular soldier of the Russian army. Yes, the irregular soldier, but they are on holiday. No, they are not on holiday, because on video they said that they have received the order to attack Ukraine. Yes, they are not on holiday, but they lost their way and appeared 60 kilometers inside of the Ukrainian territory. And this is the style which war and Russian aggression start. And in this difficult day, when Ukraine protecting our territorial integrity and our sovereignty, even having on our back the Budapest Memorandum, and Ukraine voluntarily give up the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world, and expecting the global solidarity to protect our territorial integrity, nobody stops Russia, except of Ukraine. And in this difficult day, I go to Canada, I go to the United States, and enjoy enormous bipartisan support, both in the Canadian Parliament and in the Congress of the United States. Strong and bipartisan. And that was not support just to President Poroshenko. This support of Ukrainian people who fighting not only for our soil, but for freedom, but for democracy, but for rule of law, for the values which united the whole world, and for the strong support, bipartisan support we enjoy in Canada, both with the Prime Minister Harper, with the enormous and decisive step of the Prime Minister Trudeau, Minister of Foreign Affairs, then Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Canada, fantastic Chrystia Freeland, Ukrainian origin lady, who do a lot for keeping together the global solidarity with Ukraine. And please, we should keep this solidarity. We should keep the unity of the world. Don't allow Putin to destabilize us. And by the way, I have a unique almost 6 years experience in communication with Putin. My strong piece of advice, please don't trust Putin.
You mentioned the front with Ukrainian Russian front, and there's a terrible humanitarian tragedy. More than 13,000 people have died in this conflict. And you've told me that you've been to the front many times. What do people in those front lines right now make of what is going on in the United States, where Ukraine is being talked about, but not about the aggression of Vladimir Putin, not about the annexation of Crimea, not about those more than 13,000 dead, but a matter of internal American politics? What do people think?
Definitely, almost every 2 weeks, I was on the front, on the touchline, speaking with my soldiers. And now they said, Mr. President, this is a vitally important. Don't allow Putin to stay Ukraine alone against Russia. And that's why when I was asked what we need the most, does we need the money? Yes, but not the most important. Does we need an assistance of the reform? Does we need weapons? Definitely yes. Not the most important. Again, we need a unity of the whole free world and solidarity with Ukraine. And when I told you, please don't trust Putin, that means that who is interested in the things which appeared now to the United States? I told you, whole 5 years of my presidency, we enjoy very much the strong and reliable bipartisan support. Who is interesting that Ukraine appeared not as an object of Russian aggression, which is a reason for the implementation of sanctions against Russia, until Russia do not free Ukrainian soil? Now we switch attention to the Ukraine gate. Who is interested in that? Ukraine? Definitely not. United States? Definitely not. One person who sits in Russia, who sits in Kremlin, and who enjoying that he successfully switched the global attention from the Russian aggression And I think that we make a great success because we not only stop Russia, huge, big, second military power in the world, we stop it on the Donbass. We ruin Putin's plan to create Novorossiya or Malorossiya, to divide Ukraine by half, because Putin expected that Ukrainian welcoming him. This is not happen. And now, using the instrument of the hybrid war, Putin tried to switch the global attention from this. My idea as Ukrainian president and as a Ukrainian citizen and as a real friend of United States and of Canada, but United States, we said that the struggle between Democrats and Republicans in the United States. This is the question for Americans. And Ukrainians have nothing to do with that, because we can see the United States as our biggest and reliable partner, and have nothing to do with that. But the struggle between Ukraine and Russia, struggle between Ukrainians and Putin, this is the global struggle where involved the whole free world. Because this is a struggle for democracy, struggle for freedom, struggle for future, struggle for our values which united us. And I want to thank you for that.
And you talked about just now, and you talked about before. Of course, there was a relationship whilst you were president, before what has happened this year with the hearings in Congress. And you met, of course, many of the people that are associated with Ukraine in terms of American politics, but not necessarily what's going on with Vladimir Putin and the invasion and the annexation. I mean, you met Rudy Giuliani. I mean, what did Rudy Giuliani talk about with you? What did he want to raise with you?
I met Giuliani twice in my life. First, when he was a mayor of New York. I admired him. I want to learn from him how they manage of the big, maybe or probably the best city in the world, New York, best after Kiev. And the second we met, it seems to me, in October or November year 2017. And I make the public report about this meeting. We're talking about solidarity. We're talking about increasing an American support, both support in the reform, support in the financial sector, and support in the security sector.
So he was interested in the reforms that were going on.
Reforms, only reforms, yeah. And we talk in particular and paying very much attention to that, to the cybersecurity, because that was happening immediately after Russian launch so-called non-Petya virus, which is extremely dangerous for the energy system of Ukraine, including our nuclear system. We protect our nuclear power station, but it was definitely dangerous. And Mr. Giuliani promised me to help to rise up our level for cooperation.
He didn't ask for anything in return, just for the record. No.
Look, I'm a president of Ukraine, the great European nation, the great European country, the biggest on territory in Europe. And definitely I cannot imagine this type of talks with me as a president of Ukraine.
So there was he never raised Burisma, he never raised the Bidens?
Definitely not, and it cannot be. And since October, November 17, I don't remember that I meet or make a phone conversation or anything like that.
And of course, you also met several times when you were president with President Trump.
Yes.
And what did President Trump want to talk about with you?
First of all, I was very much impressed because my first meeting was in the White House, and the president was well briefed. And we talked about the global global cooperation in security sector, support of the reform. And that was the message of the, as I feel that, real friend of Ukraine.
And as those conversations developed, you talked about, and at what stage did military assistance come into play? I mean, the Javelins have been incredibly effective, apparently, in deterring Russian tank commanders.
Yeah.
What stage did those conversations come into play about the
I was just informed that the United States make a decision to supply us Javelin.
And this was...
And we're waiting for that for about a year and a half. Why Javelin is so important for us? First of all, the two reasons. First of all, this is start to be very symbolic. We have our own anti-tank missile. But the Javelin start to be known to every Ukrainian schoolboy that this is the symbol for the cooperation between Ukraine and the United States. And these symbolic steps should be done. And point number two, immediately when we received the Javelin from the United States, now I tell you the truth. At that time, we were prohibited to use it on the touchline. We keep it on the military warehouses until the additional permission from our American partners. But, now it's not anymore, but all the Russian tanks on the occupied territory stopped to appear on the front. Russian tankers refuse to sit in the tank because, yeah, Ukrainian has a Javelin. And our numbers of casualties significantly reduced just because of this psychological factor. Can you imagine that just with this contract, we save a lot of Ukrainian lives?
And your conversations with the United States about this spanned, of course, two presidencies, because when you first became president, it was President Obama. And you didn't get any traction out of President Obama in terms of military hardware, did you?
Look, stop doing like this, that we have received something from Trump and don't receive something from Obama. Because from Obama, we receive 3 tranches of the loan guarantee from the United States. 2 of them we already returned. But in year 2014, that was a vital for Ukraine. Because we have not only an aggression. Can you imagine that immediately when I start to be a president, we have just, this is not a joke, $4,000 on our treasury. $4,000. For the salary of doctors, for the salary of teachers, for the financing of army, $4,000. We have golden currency reserve, $5 billion. In the next 4 months, we should pay $7.5 billion to return the debts. The country was absolutely bankrupt. The GDP was minus 15%. Inflation was 48%. The budget deficit was 15%. And that was a full financial catastrophe. In 1.5 years, we have an economic growth, we have 1-digit inflation, we have tripled the golden currency reserve, we launching the most difficult reform in 1 year during the war. We launching medical reform, educational reform, pension reform, security sector reform, anti-corruption reform, creating judicial reform. Can you imagine that this all happened in 1 year? In most decentralization reform, in most of this reform, we have a strong and reliable advisory support of the United States. We have effective cooperation through the International Financial Organization, where Americans help us a lot. And I'm proud that our American partners, our European partners, Japanese, Australian, Canadian, and everybody else said that we do more reform during the 5 years of the President Poroshenko than for the quarter of the century before. And the last figure I mentioned to you, when I was elected as a president, Ukraine was on the 153rd place in the rating of doing business of the World Bank. When I finished in my presidency, that was on the 64th place. And this is the biggest country, biggest progress any country demonstrate ever. This is because of you. You are co-sponsor of this result. And both President Obama and Trump, and both administration, Obama and Trump, and both parties, Democrats and Republicans. And for me, it was no matter when on the Maidan, it was Senator Murphy and Senator McCain on the stage of the Revolution of Dignity. And when I go to the front right before the new year, together with me, was the Senator McCain, Senator Lindsey Graham, and Senator Klobuchar. And 5 kilometers before the touchline, I received the intelligence information that the artillery shelling start on the position of my Marine where I go. And I asked Senator McCain, look, I am a president, the commander-in-chief, I should be with my soldiers. But your security said that it is impossible for you to go with me. And Senator McCain, could you show me this security? Who prohibit me? No, I go with you. And we were shoulder to shoulder with Ukrainian soldiers, protecting values of the free world. And with this situation, we never divide Republicans, Democrat, conservative, liberal. We are united. And this is the only precondition for us to win.
When you left office earlier this year, a lot of people remarked, diplomats who were in Kiev at the time, that the handover of power looked very much like it did when a Swedish government transfers power, when a French government, a German, it looked like Ukraine was just like any other Western democracy. This is, of course, exactly what Vladimir Putin doesn't want. And I wonder whether there's a feeling in Ukraine that despite the terrible adversity, despite what's still going on in eastern Ukraine, that you've actually showed everybody that democracy is not just possible, but it can flourish even in these kind of conditions.
First of all, definitely yes. And this was first time in Ukrainian history when the transfer of the power provides such a smoothly in an absolutely European manner. But if we demonstrating that we change the country, when I was elected as a president, the number of the Ukrainian people who support transatlantic integration Ukraine to NATO, was 16%, 1/6. When I finished my presidential term, it was 59%. Is it achievement of the President Poroshenko? No. Who do that? Putin. Because Ukrainian people not have any illusion anymore. The number of people who wants to be, that Ukraine be a member of European Union start to be almost 70%. And now we are one of the most European optimistic nation on European continent. And that's why it's so vitally important that the door of European Union should be open for us, because this is a carrot, the motivation. The same way like we do 144 reform for obtain visa-free regime with the European Union. And exactly like this, please, this is vitally important to keep NATO door open for Ukraine. Based on the decision of the Bucharest summit of NATO year 2008. And I just want to tell you that in last year, when we have a summit of NATO and commissioned Georgia, Ukraine, and NATO, all the leaders of the NATO countries said, we're waiting Ukraine in NATO. The door is open. Ukraine should make their homework and do all necessary reform in security and defense sector, in the rule of law sector, in the all other reform. But please, this is a request from Ukraine. We should have a membership action plan with the exact things Ukraine should be done and exact things that the NATO should be done. And yesterday I have had very dangerous thesis that the future membership of Ukraine would depend not only from the member states, not only from the people of Ukraine, but also if you have Russian aggression or not. Can you imagine? Anybody can imagine that the membership of Ukraine in NATO would depend on Putin. This is definitely not acceptable. And this is definitely the message we should deliver. Because Ukrainian, again, we're fighting for the Western values. We are now the eastern flank of NATO. And we are now fighting for more security, no matter in Lithuania, Baltic states, Scandinavia, Spain, or United States and Canada. We are together. And Unifier mission of Canada, extremely successful in Ukraine. An American mission in Ukraine for training and teaching. This is a win-win cooperation because American learns a lot from us how to protect their soil in the condition of the modern hybrid war. Because nobody in the world we can have such kind of conflict. Can you imagine that on the territory occupied by Russia, it was lived 5 million people. And Russia used it state-of-the-art, most modern armament, which they never use in any other parts of the world. That's why, strongly, we should keep united, definitely. And the fact that I am invited here in Halifax and the fact that we have such a discussion is the great evidence. We are together and we will win. Truth is with us and God is with us.
We have time just for a couple of questions. I believe we've gone over Burisma and all these sort of things, so let's keep it to the substantial issues we possibly can, please. Yes, someone is going to bring you. Down here, please, at the front. Yeah, here you go, Steve.
President Poroshenko, thank you so much, and good to see you again. As I think about your comments about NATO and Europe, I see leaders like Viktor Orban in Hungary in Europe, and I see Erdogan, a NATO member. Are you concerned about the solvency of the European Union and the solvency of NATO as you're looking to get in?
Thank you, President.
First of all, I'm really happy to see you, and thank you for all the material you prepared. And I tell you the truth, it is impossible to be the president of the country in a state of war and not to be the optimist. You definitely lose the war. You should strongly believe in your victory. And you should strongly believe that nobody can stop your nation when they go to Europe. Yes, we have some discussion with Orban. Unfortunately, I can tell you, ruin the diplomatic etiquette. These obstacles appeared in Orban's speech immediately after he returned from Moscow. But I'm absolutely confident we find out the solution. Because Putin was sure that 28 member states never ever can be unanimous in presenting the sanction against Russia. Putin was absolutely confident that he find out one weak country who can use a veto right. And 5 consecutive years, it was a united decision. G7, United States, European nation, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, all other nations. And now I'm absolutely confident we definitely will have support of the world. Please, keep Ukraine high in the agenda. Don't switch to the Ukrainian gate or other toxic things which avoid the attention from Russian aggression. Russia continued to kill or to wounded Ukrainian soldiers every single day. Yesterday, day before yesterday, unfortunately this happened. This is the price Ukraine paid for being free, for being democratic, for return back from the Russian Empire and from the Soviet Union to the free world. Definitely we should do that.
We've got time for one more question, but really as fast as you can, please. and we have to wrap up very quickly.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Roderich Kiesewetter from the German Parliament. President Poroshenko, you mentioned a lot NATO. You spoke about the relationship to the United States. Your country is paying a high price. What's your assessment on the Minsk process and on the European Union? You did not mention it. It's interesting.
First of all, I want to use this opportunity to thank the great European leader, German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Great diplomat, great leader of the state, and she make lots of efforts to save my country. We spent 19 hours in Minsk. And in Minsk, everything is absolutely right. What we have in Minsk: withdrawal of the Russian troops, withdrawal of the heavy artillery and weapons, disarmed all illegal armed formation, release all the hostages, return Ukrainian sovereignty on the controlled part of Ukrainian-Russian border, and have an election in the democratic system. What we need now, urgently, a roadmap how to implement the Minsk. Because without that, this is allow Putin to continue to kill Ukrainians and do nothing. And this was position of Germany, this was position of France, this was position of Ukraine, and Putin stay in the situation when he appeared every time. In the tribunal for the MH17, when Putin make a terroristic attack, in the last International Court of Justice for the financing terrorism, in the racial discrimination of the Crimean Tatar in Crimea, and many, many other things. So now we need the roadmap for the implementation of Minsk with the priority of the security component, because nobody possible to organize the democratic and free election in the presence of Russian troops. That would be the same illegal like it happened in 2014 in Crimea during so-called referendum. And with that situation, of course, on the 9th of December, where it should be in Normandy format in Paris, Ukraine, together with the European leaders, should be together. And what is the necessary component for the implementation of Minsk? I talk about that since year 2015, peacekeepers, under the mandate of the Security Council of United Nations. Before Ukraine returned to the occupied Ukrainian land, the peacekeepers can guarantee the peace, security, and absence of the Russian troops. And I want to thank that the whole free world is support me. Only Russia is against, because he want to use the peacekeepers as a kind of, Putin said, escort services, to escort special monitoring mission of OSCE from 9 to 6. And what happened in the occupied territory after, this is not interesting for Putin. We never accept these type of things. And it would be absolutely great if we can demonstrate the progress in December during the summit.
I'm told we have time for actually one more question. Dov, right here in the second row, please, could you just bring a microphone down?
Thanks very much, Dov Zakheim, used to be Undersecretary of Defense. Mr. President, Georgia's been trying to get into NATO for a very long time, with no luck. Why should it change now for Ukraine?
Look, we should stop thinking that this is only profitable or necessary for Ukraine, and NATO is not interesting for that. Europe cannot be secure without Ukraine as a member and the member states of NATO. We should understand that. And fortunately, for the last 5 years, all Europeans start to understand that they're investing not in Ukrainian security, but in their own land security. For understanding how important for Georgia to be the member of NATO, let's go to Georgia. Let's see what's happening on the border, on the touchline between Ossetia and the free Georgian land. This is a humanitarian catastrophe for the people. This is a humanitarian catastrophe for the Ukrainian people on the occupied territory. Because what Russia can produce, only Transnistria, Abkhazia, occupied Donetsk, and security disaster in Europe. And when everybody starts to understand, from Viktor Orban to to Pedro Sanchez that they are interested in this type of things, we definitely would be successful. For us, that would be good stimul for reform. For NATO, that would be expanding security. For your information, Ukraine already now spends 6% of our GDP on the security and defense sector. And we do our best that we would be foremost. We have now one of the most trained, equipped and prepared army on the continent. And the form of this effective, we are open for our allies. Please come, learn from us all the technique, all the experience, because with this cooperation, win-win form, the world would be safer, definitely, no doubt.
I'm going to ask everybody to remain in their seats as we transition to the next session. But first of all, please join me in thanking President Poroshenko for a wonderful.
Lovely.
Thank you.